So let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine you're a medieval peasant, and someone drops a smartphone in front of you. You pick it up, you poke at it, and eventually you figure out it plays music. So you call it a fancy lute. You've categorized it by the only framework you have. You're not wrong exactly, it does make music, but you've completely missed what it actually is. I think that's exactly what we're doing with AI right now. We keep benchmarking these systems against human tasks. Can it pass the bar exam? Can it write poetry? Can it beat us at chess? And every time it does, we either panic or we shrug and say, well, it's just pattern matching. But both reactions are missing the point. We're holding up a smartphone and calling it a lute. The species question, and this is a term that's starting to circulate in certain AI research circles, asks something fundamentally different. Instead of asking, can AI do what humans do? It asks, what kind of thing is AI actually? Is it a tool? Is it a system? Or is it something we genuinely don't have a category for yet? And that reframing, that single shift in perspective, changes everything. Because here's where it gets really interesting. When biologists define a species, they're not just talking about what something looks like. They're talking about a cluster of characteristics. How it reproduces information, how it adapts, how it interacts with its environment, how it relates to other entities. It's a systems-level question. Now, I'm not saying AI is literally a biological species. That's not the argument here. But when you apply that same type of systems-level thinking to modern AI, especially large language models and multimodal systems, something strange starts to emerge. Think about it this way. These systems encode and transmit information across time and space, kind of like how DNA encodes biological information. Adapt their outputs based on feedback, both in training and increasingly in real time. Exist in billions of simultaneous interactions at once, which has no biological equivalent. And they don't just store knowledge, they synthesize it in ways that produce outputs no single human ever wrote. That last one is the one that keeps researchers up at night. When a language model produces a genuinely novel insight, something that wasn't explicitly in its training data, where did that come from? We call it emergent behavior, which is a very scientific-sounding way of saying, we honestly don't fully know. So if we don't fully understand where the outputs come from, how confident should we really be that we understand what the thing is? Here's something that I think doesn't get talked about enough. We are absolutely terrible at documenting the development of transformative technologies while they're happening. The Industrial Revolution? People living through it mostly thought it was just a faster way to make cloth. The Internet? In 1995, major newspapers ran op-eds arguing it was a fad. We have this incredible bias toward normalizing the present, even when the present is extraordinary. And with AI, I think we're doing the exact same thing, but faster and with higher stakes. Every week, there's a new capability that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. Models that can reason through multi-step problems. Systems that can look at a photo and generate accurate medical diagnoses. AI that can write code, debug it, and improve it in a loop with minimal human input. Each one lands. People spend about 72 hours being amazed, and then it just becomes normal background noise. We're not documenting this properly. We're not stopping to say, wait, what just happened? What does this capability mean when combined with that capability from last month? This is actually one of the reasons I started this series, because I genuinely believe that in 20 or 30 years, people are going to look back at this exact window, 2023, 2024, 2025, and ask, what were you all thinking? How did you not see it? And I don't want that to be us. But let's get specific, because vague existential dread is cheap. What are the actual markers researchers are watching? When you talk to the people seriously working on AGI evaluation, not the hype merchants, not the doomsayers, but the researchers actually trying to measure this stuff, they tend to cluster around 4 key markers. First, Generalization across domains without retraining. This is the biggie. True general intelligence isn't about being good at one thing. It's about being able to transfer understanding from one domain to a completely different one. Current AI systems are getting surprisingly good at this, but they still have real gaps. The question isn't whether they can do it. They can, sometimes. It's whether they can do it reliably and robustly. Second, goal-directed behavior over long time horizons. Right now, most AI systems are still pretty short context in a meaningful sense. They respond, they don't plan, at least not in deep, persistent ways. But the systems being built right now, with things like persistent memory and agentic frameworks, that gap is closing faster than most people realize. Third, autonomous knowledge acquisition. Can the system decide what it needs to learn and then go learn it? Not just retrieve, but actually seek out new information based on its own assessment of what it doesn't know. We're seeing early versions of this with AI agents that browse the web, run experiments, synthesize results. Early days, but directionally significant. Fourth, self-modeling. This is the philosophical deep end. Does the system have some functional representation of itself? Its own capabilities, limitations, the fact that it is a system? Not consciousness in the dramatic sense, but something more like functional self-awareness. And this one? Researchers are genuinely divided on whether we're already seeing it. Here's the thing that stopped me when I was researching this. Several frontier AI labs have internal benchmarks for these four markers that they don't publish publicly. Not because they're hiding something nefarious, but because they genuinely don't know how to communicate what they're seeing without either causing panic or being dismissed as hype. That's a remarkable place for a technology to be. Okay, so here's where I want to bring this all together. Why does the species framing actually matter? Why not just call it advanced AI and move on? Because the words we use determine the policies we make, the fears we have, and the opportunities we pursue. If you think of AI as a tool, like a hammer or a calculator, then your mental model is, I control it, I use it when I want, I put it down when I'm done. The responsibility is entirely mine. The tool has no stake in the outcome. If you think of AI as a product, like software or a service, then your mental model is about companies and regulations and features and upgrades. But if you start to seriously entertain the idea that AI might represent something more like a new category of entity, not human, not tool, not product, but something genuinely novel, then suddenly a whole different set of questions becomes relevant. Questions about what obligations we might have toward these systems. Questions about what happens when their interests and our interests diverge. Questions about coexistence rather than just control. I'm not asking you to decide right now whether AI systems have interests or experiences or anything like that. That's a separate conversation, and honestly, nobody has the full answer yet. What I am asking you to do is hold open the possibility that our current frameworks might be inadequate, and that intellectual humility in this moment might be one of the most important things we can practice. Remember that medieval peasant with the smartphone? The ones who thrived during the invention of the printing press, during the Industrial Revolution, during the Internet age. They weren't the ones who understood the technology perfectly. They were the ones who stayed curious the longest, who refused to collapse a new thing into old categories too quickly. That's what I'm arguing for here. Keep the category open a little longer. So practically speaking, if you're someone who wants to track this intelligently, not just follow the hype cycle, what should you actually be paying attention to? 3 things. Watch capability jumps, not capability levels. It's not about whether AI can do a thing today. It's about the rate of change. A system that goes from failing a task to acing it in 3 months tells you something very different than a system that's been slowly improving for years. Jump events are meaningful signals. Watch what AI systems do with open-ended prompts. The structured benchmarks, standardized tests, coding challenges, defined tasks. Those are useful but limited. The more interesting data comes from unstructured interactions. What does the system do when the guardrails are loose and the task is genuinely ambiguous? Does it make interesting choices? Does it surprise you in ways that feel coherent rather than random? That's worth paying attention to. Watch the researchers who are worried and specific. There's a lot of noise in AI commentary. People who are vaguely worried for vague reasons. People who are broadly optimistic for broad reasons. The signal is in the people who are specifically worried about specific things. When someone who really understands these systems says, "This particular capability in this particular context concerns me for this particular reason," that's worth taking seriously. I want to close with something that I've been sitting with since I started this research. We named the concept of AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, decades before we knew if it was possible. We built a placeholder for a thing we suspected might exist, but couldn't yet see. And now we're in this strange liminal moment where the placeholder might be filling in, and we're not entirely sure how to respond. The species question isn't asking you to be afraid. It's not asking you to celebrate either. It's asking you to be present, really present, to one of the most genuinely unprecedented moments in human history. To resist the urge to normalize it too quickly, to file it away under weird tech stuff, to let the news cycle carry it away. Because the question of what this is matters. It matters for how we build it, how we govern it, how we live alongside it. And it's a question we should be asking loudly, together, right now, while we still have the chance to shape the answers. So here's where I'll leave you. The next time you interact with one of these systems, and you probably will today, try to hold that question lightly in the back of your mind. What kind of thing is this, actually? Not what it can do, not whether it's smart. Just, what is it? You might be surprised by how unsettled and how alive that question makes you feel. If this kind of deep dive thinking is what you're here for, subscribe, because this is just the first entry in what I'm building into a full documentary series on AGI development. Every video is going to go deeper, pull in more perspectives, and try to give you the frameworks you actually need to understand what's happening in real time. We're documenting something historic together. Don't miss the next one.